Okay, so we had seen in the last slide that how Shambhu goes to the city, but the city has a different relationship between with its migrant population, with the population that we call as the subaltern. Uh, what is the city? The city already is crumbling. The familial values are crumbling in the city. Moral strengths are crumbling. There is no moral strength. Ethics is failing in the city. The city itself is under a lot of stress. There is a lot of sorrow for the people, and thus people who take shelter in the city also have to are forced to live under these circumstances, because the city itself is a crumbling edifice. Calcutta itself is an old city, so you can understand how it's crumbling. Familial values are crumbling, and thus you notice that there is a lot of violence, there is a lot of corruption, there is a lot of sorrow in the city. And the city is even more unpardoning to people who are dispossessed, who don't have any value, who don't have any land, who are excluded from the power structure. The city is not very kind to people who are outside of the power sharing structure. So what is Shambhu done? What is Shambhu done? Shambhu was trying to escape from the power structure of his village. Shambhu was trying to escape from the feudal organization and the clutches of the landlord when he was escaping from the village. So he was already trying to free himself while coming to the city, free himself from that the feudalistic village, the feudal landlord, and he was trying to emancipate his position in a way. But when he comes to the city, he again falls back into the same cycle of being stuck in outside the power structure. Because the city itself is full of vices. City is a place of apathy, so there city itself is a very contesting space. The city is not that space of dream which Shambhu or any other such migrant laborer would have imagined. The city is not the same which they would have dreamt of. The city itself is a highly contested site with a lot of vices, moral strands crumbling, ethics crumbling, and so the city is no different. There is struggle in the city too. If there was struggle in the village, life in the city is no fairy tale. So the city does not provide any succor, any hope to Shambhu and his son. So Shambhu and his son who go to the city, all their hopes actually die slowly in the city. All their aspirations come to nil, because the city is a very unforgiving space. The city does not allow the migrant, the subaltern, to dream. The subaltern remains the subaltern even when he arrives at the city. The city runs, the labyrinths of the city is full of such corruption that the subaltern cannot come out from its clutches ever. So, if we look at, so this was about the city. Now, if we look at from the angle of the idea of a coloniality, of colonialism, because remember we had just got independence. The decade of the 1950s was the first decade after the independence. Now, if you look at it, the migration to the city can also be called as the effect of colonial expansionism. So if you consider the rural landlord as the colonial power, the the grabbing and the snatching away of the land can be considered to be expansionism, which we saw very well under colonialism. So the Zamindars step to merge this land, this Do Beegha Zameen of Shambhu, and into this factory can be seen as this how colonial power is slowly expanding its tentacles and trying to build factories, uh, make structures of exploitation. So these factories will be structures of exploitation, which it was during the British era, during the colonial period. So this do bigha zameen, this small piece of land, if it can be considered to be the motherland, if it is considered to be the metaphoric motherland, it can be considered that the landlord encroaches upon this motherland and exposes this evil design of the colonial master, because he violates the sanctity of this piece of motherland, this do because Zameen. So the colonial master violates this sanctity. He encroaches upon rather illegally and makes it his own, like the Britishers made India its own. So the subaltern can be said to be powerless in front of such colonial expansionism. The subaltern is or has always been at the periphery, and in front of such a colonial juggernaut, it can only but surrender, albeit after a lot of struggle. Uh, so, if you look at this city, you will see that people come and settle in the city from different places. There is a lot of heterogeneity to the structure of the city. It is cosmopolitan or composite in nature, because the lower strata of the society is mainly based on migrant subaltern labor, and they all come from different places of the country. But one of the important commonalities of these people are they are all dispossessed, they are displaced, they are oppressed and alienated, and thus this diaspora of migrant laborer create their own epistemology. This group of migrant laborers who make the city their own, who struggles forms one of the subterranean level of the city. Their stories, they make their new stories, they make the new epistemology of the metropolis. They are at the heart of this city. They keep the city running, they keep the city moving. The juggernaut of the city keeps moving. At the climax of the movie, the climatic point is very important. It shows Shambhu's family is walking towards the horizon after losing his land. Now, this is symbolic, almost like the exile. He has been exiled. So, diaspora is a forced exile. This migrant diaspora is a forced exilement. And at the end, you see that Shambhu's father has gone mad. This is symbolic. It is a metaphoric. It's almost like the loss of consciousness for the nation. It's a colonized identity under the hegemonic superstructure. So Shambhu's predicament in being a subaltern, in being somebody powerless, is shows and his losing control over his plot of land shows us that the morality of the nation has been lost. There is a loss of consciousness. People have, and this is almost metaphoric, that the father loses sanity. He stops being a normal person, because you can't be normal under such terrific struggling sorrow that this family faces. And this almost shows the predicament of a colonized person, how their lives are under duress, under a colonial superstructure. They are only but the laborers they're only but the structural laborers who run the superstructure called the colonial empire, which hegemonizes their existence. So the city, or it be in the village, the predicament of the subaltern laborer, the predicament of the migrant, the predicament of the poor people remains the same. And it is but only normal that Bimal Roy captures this this story of a person in the periphery in a neorealist manner. So the neorealism in the film, the neorealism that he portrays, emanates from the fact that Bimal Roy could capture the slice of the pessimism of the Indian working class society in the 1950s of the last decade. Uh, so there is this constant onslaught, seizure, and erasure of his identity. There is a constant onslaught on his resources. There is constant seizure of his resources, and there is an erasure of his identity, of his value, belongings, of his all material objects in life. He is also deprived of his the last bits of self last bits of the truthfulness that the migrant laborer has, the last bits of honesty that he has in his heart. So Beegha Zameen becomes a truly representative of an Indian realist representation of the Indian society. In fact, Bimal Roy has been considered to be a neorealist film director, and so much so that his films are considered classics in his era. And Balraj Sahni, the protagonist, has played a marvelous role in this. I would urge all of you to kindly go through the film before you attend this lecture, because until and unless you have felt the pain of a subaltern person in the 50s, of a migrant laborer who loses everything and migrates with nothing in hand and with a vague future, you won't understand the manner in which Bimal Roy captures that reality. And his films are, of course, a very important contribution to the rich Indian cinematic neorealist tradition. Thank you for today.